Hello everyone! Today I'd like to take a look at accelerationism, something that isn't really an ideology in and of itself, but rather what I call an accessory ideology. That is, a means to achieve a goal, a tool if you will. Accelerationism has become a popular staple among certain groups all around the political spectrum, from wannabe revolutionaries to keyboard warriors to galaxy-brained armchair philosophers who think blowing up society is a cheat code to utopia. The reality is that accelerationism in practice achieves none of this. It is not a pathway to improvement. Rather, it's a one-way ticket to a blood-soaked hellscape, and I'm going to explain to you why. If you've ever wondered what happens when you mix nihilism, a Reddit thread, and a Molotov cocktail, the answer is that you get accelerationism. This is the ideology for people who think that Mad Max is a 5-year plan. But before we dunk on these lunatics, let's define what the hell we're talking about, because trust me, it's a lot dumber than you think. Accelerationism is the deranged belief that the best way to fix society or bring about your dream ideology is to speed up society's collapse. Adherents to accelerationists, look at the world, see a dumpster fire, and think, you know what this needs? More gasoline. It's like trying to fix a broken leg by jumping off a cliff. Now, there are two main flavors of this madness, which is left-wing and right-wing accelerationism. Superficially, they're different, but they share the same roots and presuppositions. Both are dumber than a bag of hammers, but let's break it down real quick. First off, left-wing accelerationism. Now, these are the pink-haired, trust fund Marxists who think capitalism is a blue sky post away from imploding. They believe that if they crank up the chaos, riots, and strikes, smashing Starbucks windows and whatnot, it'll hasten the glorious proletariat revolution. Think of them as the kids who read half of Das Kapital, got bored, and decided burning down a Wendy's is the same as storming the Bastille. Their heroes are folks like the Weather Underground who thought bombing banks in the 70s would spark the Great Communist Awakening. Instead, they just got a lot more people killed and made everyone hate hippies more, and of course that communist revolution never came about. Then on the other side, you've got right-wing accelerationism. Essentially, these are the morons that get tricked by federal agents into becoming tiki torch-carrying edgelords who think society's too degenerate and needs a hard reset. These guys jerk off to Viking runes and the Turner Diaries, fantasizing about a race war or a collapse that'll let them rebuild a trad utopia where everyone's a 6'6" pagan Nordicist, armed and reciting Evola by candlelight. They're generally buying guns but never learning to shoot them, and waiting for the day of the rope, desperately hoping that the 1950s comes back. Of course, they do nothing to actually act on this other than shoot up a school or something, which achieves nothing and sets their ideology back by years. Now, both sides think they're the chosen ones, destined to emerge from the ashes like a phoenix. After all, surely their ideology is what will rise to power when society collapses. But the reality is that accelerationism does not work. It's never worked. It's like trying to fix your iPhone by throwing it into a blender. Accelerationism isn't just stupid or impractical either, though. It's actually an actively evil ideology. To understand accelerationism, you have to understand the core of it. Accelerationism isn't just a bad idea, it's a moral black hole. It's built on a single, simple, and disgusting premise, that human suffering is a means to an end. The accelerationists don't care how many bodies pile up, how many families are destroyed, or how many cities burn, as long as it gets them closer to their fantasy utopia. It's the kind of thinking that makes you want to shower with bleach. Now, the evil of accelerationism becomes more and more obvious the more you dig into the ideology. Accelerationists don't build anything. They don't write constitutions, they don't invent technologies, they don't plant gardens. Their entire plan is to tear shit down and hope something better magically appears. It's the equivalent of deciding you don't like a restaurant, so you set fire to the restaurant in the hopes that 5 years from now, a better restaurant is built on the property. Historically, this never ends well. Look at the French Revolution, for example. Robespierre and his guillotine fetishists thought they'd accelerate France into a utopia of liberty. Instead, Europe ended up soaked in rivers of blood, a reign of terror, and eventually Napoleon, who brought some stability for a while but was basically a dictator, an exceptionally talented dictator but still a dictator who ended up harming and weakening France long term. Good job, guys. The thing is that accelerationists ultimately just see humans as pawns in some sort of cosmic chess game. Accelerationists will cheer when a small business burns because it's a destruction of capitalist oppression, or will shrug at a school shooting because it wakes people up. This is by definition sociopathic. Genuinely, accelerationism pretty much perfectly fits the dictionary definition of sociopathy. They're so obsessed with their endgame, they forget the people caught in the crossfire. Mothers, kids, regular Joes trying to pay their bills are actual human beings, real individuals. If your ideology requires a baptism of blood to succeed, it's an evil ideology. There's a single, very easy way to determine if someone is an accelerationist or not. Do they revere martyrdom? Do they praise martyrs or wish to die one? You see, accelerationists fetishize martyrdom like it's a kink. They glorify dying for the cause, whether it's a suicide bomber for the left or a heroic last stand for the right. The reality is that martyrdom is not courageous, it's cowardice dressed up as nobility. Real change comes from building and persuading people, not blowing yourself up to stick it to the system. Any ideology that celebrates death over life is a death cult, plain and simple, and death cults belong in the trash bin of history. Frankly, the most famous accelerationist ideology of all time is Islam, or at the very least many sects of it. The Islamist reveres martyrdom, adores societal degradation, and will push society more and more and more towards chaos and fire and brimstone until some major conflict arises, which he hopes the caliphate will emerge from. The Palestinians are the perfect example of this. Whether you sympathize with their grievances or not, it's clear that their strategy of constantly launching new wars for 70 years in the hopes that, somehow, through their martyrdom and bloodshed, Islam will prevail, that strategy has seemingly not improved their situation at all whatsoever. The simple reality is that if your plan to save the world involves more corpses than a Tarantino movie, you're not the hero. Because accelerationism doesn't just fail, it fails spectacularly. Every time someone tries to speed up history, they end up setting their own cause back for decades. You know what, let's look at some examples of these geniuses in action, because there are plenty of examples outside the Middle East. The Bolsheviks were some of the OG accelerationists. Lenin and his merry band of bearded pedophiles thought they could skip the boring parts of history and jump straight to communism by overthrowing the Tsar and shooting anyone who disagreed. The end result was a civil war that killed millions, famines, and a Soviet Union that was less of a workers' paradise and more of an Orwellian nightmare. Oh, and communism didn't exactly sweep the globe like they hoped. Instead, they got Stalin, who made Lenin look like a choir boy, and rightfully discredited commies. Nice work, comrades. Then again, fast forward to the 1970s with the Weather Underground, these left-wing hippies thought bombing government buildings would spark a revolution against the man. Their plan was to accelerate the collapse of capitalism by blowing stuff up and writing manifestos that nobody read. Outcome, they killed a bunch of people, scared the shit out of everyone else, and made the left look like a bunch of unhinged lunatics. The FBI cracked down, Nixon got reelected in a landslide, and the only thing they accelerated were their sentencings. And if you've noticed, America still hasn't undergone a communist revolution. Bravo, boys, you really achieved a whole lot with that one. Then on the right, you've got plenty of accelerationists too, of course. Generally, these guys take the forms of morons who shoot up a Walmart or a school or something to bring about a race war, and instead just end up shooting mostly white people or getting more anti-gun legislation passed. The government cracks down more and more on their own movement, and they're delegitimized in the eyes of the public, because school shooters generally aren't very sympathetic figures, believe it or not. Now, do you notice a pattern here? Accelerationists think they're playing 4D chess, but it's more like they're flipping over the chessboard and declaring victory. Even should the game be completely disrupted and need to start over, the accelerationists don't have experience building institutions, they don't have a plan for the day after, and so what will happen is that the same institutions that already existed will take over again. Accelerationism doesn't create change, it creates chaos. The only thing it accelerates is the irrelevance and sidelining of the ideology that the accelerationists want to promote. Every time they try to break the system just gets stronger and their cause gets taken less and less seriously. I've noticed that accelerationism attracts the kind of people who jerk off to their own manifestos, you know, the authoritarian types. It's a magnet for narcissists who think they're the next Lenin or Hitler, destined to rule the ashes of the fallen West. Authoritarian ideologies seem to attract the most accelerationists because they're built on the same ego trip. One guy, one vision, one boot on everyone's neck. The promise of a baptism of blood lets these people feel like they're part of something epic, when in reality they're just serving as an enemy for the establishment to rally against. The accelerationist-authoritarian connection could also be because accelerationists essentially want to take a shortcut to power, which never really pans out. They don't see a reason to convince people of their own beliefs, when they can just burn it all down and declare themselves king after all. The accelerationist is essentially a lazy revolutionary. Again, it's why you see accelerationism more in ideologies that fetishize control over liberty. The idea that you just need to do this one thing to achieve your ideal society is a very appealing delusion to those who have already bought into authoritarian utopian ideas. If you believe the state or a strongman will be your savior, then you don't really feel the need to do much work other than just start a war and wait for the arrival of that promised utopia. It all boils down to the simple fact that if your ideology needs a body count to get off the ground, it's an evil ideology. I want to go back to martyrdom for a bit here, because any ideology that tells you dying is better than living is ultimately a middle finger to everything that makes us human. Life is about creating, building, improving the human condition. Instead of doing all that, the jihadist instead blows themselves up, achieving nothing but destruction. That isn't noble, it's nihilistic. Martyrdom cults prey on the lost, the angry, and the desperate. They take kids with no purpose, fill their heads with visions of glory, and send them to die for a cause they barely understand. Look at ISIS, for example, the Islamic State. They didn't recruit PhDs, they didn't recruit doctors. They targeted lonely teens with promises of paradise. Same with Antifa. They're not heroes, they're cannon fodder for someone else. Again, if your ideology's plan for you is to turn you into a human firecracker, maybe it's time to shop for a new one. Real heroes don't die for the cause. That's moronic. You don't want to die for the cause, you want to live for the cause. Build cultural institutions that promote your values. Persuade people of your beliefs. Actually tangibly change minds. Instead, accelerationists just want to go out in a blaze of glory and leave the rest of us to clean up the mess. It's really pathetic. So at the end of the day, what's the alternative to all this accelerationist nonsense? It's actually pretty simple. You have to do the hard work. Society's not perfect, hell, it's a fucking mess these days, but we don't fix it by setting it on fire. We fix it by building, persuading, and standing up for what's right without resorting to bloodbaths. You want change? Start a business. Run for office. Write a book. Hell, start a YouTube channel and rant on the internet like I'm doing right now. Seriously, I was inspired to make this channel primarily by MantisWave, who's the great example of a non-accelerationist successfully promoting his ideology, and now I'm managing to promote that same ideology to other people. This is how ideologies snowball and end up becoming massive and influential. Every great society was built by people who rolled up their sleeves, not by people who rolled up guillotines, okay? Look at the Founding Fathers, for example. Yes, they engaged in a war, but they didn't just blow up British ships. They wrote a constitution, argued, compromised, and built a nation. They had a fuck ton of meetings to reason out their ideology and build institutions that would allow the nation to survive. That's ultimately pretty badass, even if I don't agree with them ideologically on everything they decided on. Ultimately, the validity of an ideology depends on how it treats the individual, how it treats your right to life, liberty, and property without some ideologue telling you to die for a cause. You shouldn't worship flags or manifestos. If your ideology demands blood, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. Long story short, accelerationism isn't just a bad idea, really. It's ultimately a cancer, a societal cancer. It's the ideology of losers who think destruction is a personality trait. It's evil because it worships chaos, treats people as disposable, and fetishizes death over life. History proves it fails every single time, leaving nothing but blood and broken dreams in its wake. It's really just like this insidious force that takes over like the main proponents of an ideology and kills that ideology, preventing it from rising to anything substantial or meaningful or good. History proves it fails every single time. And it's especially seductive to authoritarians who want an excuse to play God and end up falling for propaganda spread by glowies instead. Thankfully, Brass Gang is better than that. We are not going to commit a school shooting. We are not going to do any of that, okay? I can't afford to lose the subscribers. So don't do glowy shit, guys. Don't fall for fucking feds. Don't be retarded, okay? Anyway, that's it for today, Brass Gang. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. I still read all the comments, so feel free to leave one, and I hope you all have a wonderful, fantastic day. And thank you for 7,000 subscribers as well.
This is totally not his editor. This is Taxed Brass. It's me, Taxed Brass. I have something to announce.